Europeans are just like, you know, more strict, more boxed in. That's how I feel. Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. We're gonna be checking out a video titled, Is Life Better in the United States, USA, or Europe? An honest review. So this is coming from Nathaniel Drew. So link for the original video will be in the description. But my 2 cents, I genuinely don't think life, you know, is better in Europe or the United States unless you yourself have a target. You know what I mean? It's not like you're gonna just wake up one morning and just be better off in the United States or better off in Europe. You have to prefer a certain type of lifestyle. And, you know, that's really the only difference between Europe and the United States lifestyle. I'll definitely, you know, say that both countries are very much achieving places. Well, I just said country. I literally just classed Europe as a country. That was embarrassing. Okay, I'm not gonna say anything else. Yeah. Let's get right into this video, guys. I'm so sorry for just doing that. I actually, wow. Okay, let's get into this video.
It turns out humans are not the same everywhere. Who you are is at least partially influenced by where you are. Your environment literally has an impact on you. And if you don't believe me, studies show this. And this is a dynamic that's influencing all of us, including me, as I've moved from one continent to another. The tug of war between the US and Europe is just so intriguing to me. It just feels like this endless battle between the new and the old world in the West. There's no right and wrong, obviously, when it comes to a discussion like this of cultural comparison. There's just trade-offs. It turns out that you can't have it all. I think the human race really benefits as a species from our differences. Plus, it's really fun to articulate the things that I'm seeing take place in the world. And so that's the inspiration behind this piece, comparing the life that I've lived for 19 years in the US to the one that I've lived for 5 years here in Europe, and how my view of things continues to evolve. Now, national stereotypes are nothing new, right? One of the easiest ones to point to is the idea that there's more introversion in Asia, for example. Generally speaking, massive generalization, and more extroversion in other places, like Brazil. There are exceptions to all generalizations, right? But there's also a grain of truth. You know, the jokes that we make about these sorts of things wouldn't be funny if they were completely inaccurate. If I were to say, oh, the US is a quiet country that is very respectful to all.
Yo, it's been a minute since I see one of the monster trucks, man. Hey, dude. Oh my gosh. I'm sorry. I had to pause the video just because I saw a stupid ass monster truck. But listen, I love that stuff, okay? I'm sorry.
Other nations and doesn't make a lot of noise. I lose all credibility, right? You just don't believe me because there's not really a lot of truth to that. Now, while I've already made a few pieces exploring cultural comparisons between different parts of the world, different countries and different regions, I want to dig a little bit deeper this time. Beyond superficial comparisons like, oh,
Europeans use air conditioning a lot less than Americans.
Yes, produce is a lot cheaper and a lot higher quality in Europe than in the United States because the governments subsidize that sort of thing because people care about it a lot more. And yes, technology is a lot more affordable in the United States, partially because of taxation on imports, but also because as a society, there's more of an orientation towards innovation. And one of the ways that keeping up with the Joneses manifests itself in the US is having the latest shiny thing. But I want to dig deeper into the character of these two continents and the trends that I'm noticing in people that live in these two continents.
Oh my God, there's no lanes. There are no lanes.
Fair warning,
wow.
These are just my opinions. I am just sharing my observations that I see in the world and within myself. So take it or leave it. And if you disagree with something that I say, please feel free to share it in the comments. This is supposed to be fun. I find this sort of thing fun.
We do, baby, we do.
For every point I'm going to make here, I'm going to really try, despite my biases, yes, I chose to live in Europe, explore the positives and negatives here, because I think there are positives and negatives on both sides. Americans are known for their patriotism, literally thinking to themselves, we are the best. And that's definitely not everyone, but enough people do think that it's a real thing. This really cracks me up because, you know, that's got to be one of the fastest ways that I can think of to tick someone off. Like, who likes the guy who shows up at the party and won't stop talking about how they're the best? As I'm sure you can tell, this really annoyed me quite a bit, having grown up in the US, but with immigrant parents. But a lot of Americans really believe this. And what doesn't help matters is the reality that a lot of people can point to the fact that the US is a world superpower. And look, there are a lot of really proud Europeans too, and maybe secretly they think they're the best Okay, but it is a little bit
That's
harder to
real.
make the argument that you're the top dog right now if you're Greek or Italian, when in reality your moment to shine came centuries ago. For the record, I don't think there's a best country. I don't think in those terms. I think different countries are good at different.
Yeah, I exactly what he was about to say. I definitely agree. I don't think there's a best country. However, I think there is. My country is better at this. You know, like you can say Brazil, Argentina, soccer, Germany, soccer, automotive, Germany. You know, freaking who has the best sound and language? You can't say that because that's opinions. You know what I mean? Because at the end of the day, that's opinions. And I think greatest country, or best country, I should say, is really opinion. You know what I mean? It's really based off of, oh, okay, what do I prefer as a person compared to what you prefer? It's just opinions at the end of the day. So to a lot of us, America is actually the place, the best in the world, right? I love the United States. But being here in Finland, there are many things that I've actually witnessed that makes me go, oh my days. I love that. But there are things in Finland that makes me go like, good Lord, bro, like what the hell is this? Yeah, that's just how it is. So you got to take the good with the bad, like they say. But I don't think there's a such thing as the best place, you know, unless you're talking about your preference.
Things. And I don't feel like quantitative measurements like GDP say anything about the quality of a country. Now, the reason I bring all of this up is because of a weird feeling that I get when I return to the US. It's this feeling that I'm in the center of the universe. And obviously I know that's not the case, but the relationship between the US and Europe doesn't work the same way both ways. Here in Europe, there's a steady stream of news coming from the US, but when I'm over there, it feels like there isn't much talk about what's going on in the rest of the world unless something really big happens, like a war. Most mainstream media barely covers what's going on internationally, and unless you're a worldly American, and there definitely are some of those out there, you don't have very much of an idea of what's going on out there. In many ways, the US does feel geographically isolated. And maybe that's because the distance between Los Angeles and Las Vegas is bigger than the distance between Paris and London. It does feel like Europe is closer to a lot of the rest of the world. And because the distance is smaller, you can't pretend that there aren't neighbors all around you. France cannot pretend Germany isn't like right there. I personally believe this is a major factor in how we ended up with the stereotype that Americans are terrible at geography, world geography. Maybe also the stereotype that a lot of Americans are uncultured. And speaking of that, actually, culture is a confusing word.
It sure is, because I've seen a lot of people speak about culture and, you know, and I'm like, what do you even mean by your culture? Like, I've even in dating scenarios, I've seen many people reference that it's best to date someone of your own culture. And I'm like, then why is divorce so prominent throughout your culture? Because culture has nothing to do with a lot of what people think it is, right? We mix cultures in the wrong terminologies, right? And it's really similarities that we're comparing, and we're like, oh, okay, that's my culture. But a lot of people actually mess up the word culture, and I want to hear what he's going to say about it right now.
There's something extremely interesting to me about the whole conversation about culture. According to a lot of Europeans, the US is a place that lacks culture. But that doesn't make a lot of sense because the US is actually one of, if not the biggest exporters of culture in the whole world. That's one of those things that really shocked me when I moved abroad. Everyone is exposed to the aforementioned American media, and therefore American politics and current events. American music is everywhere, it's ubiquitous. Honestly, you could say I'm an export of the United States, and I'm not sure I could argue with that. The US is like always the loudest kid in the room. And even just cities like New York are an explosion of art, and it's one city in a giant country. So what are we saying here really? What are Europeans referring to? I don't think these big mainstream exports are what Europeans are referring to. I think they're talking about what you do on a day-to-day basis and how much that can change from region to region. I'm talking about the customs and traditions that have been passed down for generations. the different regional dishes that come from centuries ago. I'm talking about the superstitions or the different card games or the celebrations that take place that commemorate something that happened before modern day France or Austria or Italy even existed. Bizarre linguistic quirks, beyond the fact that there's a different language every direction you look. Architecture that changes
Right.
every few hundred kilometers or miles. Am I suggesting that the US does not have customs and traditions? No, it does. I think
It
about
does.
Thanksgiving and Halloween and hot dogs.
Yeah, shout out to Thanksgiving first of all and Halloween because that's my birthday. Yeah. And it's the thing is, I think that Europe has a wonderful culture. They have history with culture, right? The United States doesn't have as much history mixed in with the culture. In fact, I don't think a lot of the United States culture has anything to do with history at all, because yes, everything that you do now is a past thing that happened and you're doing it. But I mean, in terms of involvement, there's not much things that reflect to the past. There's not buildings that you can look at and it takes you back. That's what I mean. So you might have cultural things that came from the past, obviously, but it's not reflecting the past in a sense where you feel like you're there. That's the difference between Europe, though, and the United States. You go a lot of places and you're like, dude, this feels ancient. Like, I feel like I'm in the 1500s right now, right? For crying out loud, you check out places like Germany, you got things that probably are 1,000 years old, still standing. So I think they have a lot more history with their culture. And I think with Europe, you guys do not blend your culture in a sense that you have this thing that you created and you try as your best to keep it exactly like that for as long as possible. I think that's why, probably you guys' culture feels so different compared to the American culture. But obviously America has culture with the hot dog, the hamburgers and stuff like that. But hamburgers are not even American. But that's the thing. Americans will take that and then they just, do a lot of weird crap with it, make a huge hamburger, and now that's a culture. People, challenge themselves who can eat the biggest hamburger. It's crazy, but yeah, culture is definitely there. But yeah, Europeans are definitely going to look at that as a little bit, ugh, you know what I mean? So I definitely understand.
Architecture that changes every few hundred kilometers or miles. Am I suggesting that the US does not have customs and traditions? No, it does. I think about Thanksgiving and Halloween and hot dogs and baseball, the Super Bowl. There are a lot of things. It's a
Super
big
Bowl.
country. But
Yeah.
one thing all of these things have in common is that they stretch across the entire expanse of the country. The US,
Yeah.
for better or for worse, is associated with uniformity and scale. Maybe that's just a facet of being such a young country. For better or for worse, Europeans see the KFCs and the Starbucks that are dotted across all of their major cities, and they see that as the mark of the US and how it operates. Now, a lot of Americans know this, and some even criticize this, right? But it's still happening. I just personally have a sinking feeling when I see the same exact strip mall in any state that I might go. And it does feel like the only way I can see the same thing in Hungary and Spain is if I go to a major chain, a lot of which are American. Again, maybe this is because of size.
That is true.
A 4-hour train ride can take you to any one of like 7 countries in Europe, and you're lucky if a 4-hour flight will take you outside of the US. And I think a lot of Europeans take pride in this cultural richness, the density of different things going on, being able to go to a different place so easily and not understand a word. One
That
major
is true.
difference for me between the Europe and US is the language element. And I know I care about this more than most people, but I do think it has an impact on your experience of each place. And it's one of the main reasons why I moved to Europe. Yes, you have all kinds of language diversity in places like Miami and New York, which is really cool. But overall, English will do the job in the US.
Exactly.
That's really not the case in Europe. Yes, English is the most international language, but still to this day, not being able to speak French when you're in France means you are not having the full French experience. That's just how it is. And honestly, I love living in a world where there are many different languages and many different ways to say things, and that we don't all necessarily understand each other. For me, it's very stimulating seeing or hearing the different sounds and different ways that people can communicate with each other. It adds a lot of color to the world. Yes,
It does.
I speak Spanish, but if I go to Barcelona or spend time in Catalonia, I don't understand Catalan. I speak Italian, but Southern Italians are difficult for me to understand, partially because of the accent, partially because of the dialects. It's just awesome richness that I appreciate so much. And kind of counterintuitively, it is precisely because there is that barrier there, that it's difficult to learn a language, that it's difficult to decode how people are communicating, that when you do unlock that door, it's like that much more incredible. That is what makes languages so amazing to me. They're world expanding tools. I fell in love with France and with Europe when I did my exchange in France because I was forced to learn the language. I just had to. It was like learning how to think in a new way. There's something so exciting about that to me. Without that, I would have never immersed myself in France. I would have never created the life that I have now. Speaking the language is often the difference between having a superficial tourist experience and delving deeper into the culture. I like to think of it as overcoming the moat around a castle so that you can actually storm the castle itself. Who doesn't want to see what's inside that castle, you know what I mean? Now, speed of life. One of the things that really struck me the last time I went back to the US is the speed of things and the fact that there are less guardrails, less people and things that are going to slow you down or get in your way. And because of that, many people go very fast in the US, for example. It's perfectly socially acceptable to wolf down a sandwich in 3 minutes and get right back to work. I'm not saying that's what always happens. I'm just saying that it's okay. People are not going to judge you. It's like an acceptable thing to do. And people will walk down the street eating, or they'll eat in their car. And in Europe, you're never going to see those sorts of things. Or if you do, it's like an extremely rare, I don't know, I can't remember ever seeing it personally.
Yeah.
These things are
My ass eating in the car. That's crazy. Dude, like about probably less than 4 days ago, I had, I bought was it Burger King? Yeah, I went to Burger King and I actually bought a sandwich and I had French fries with it, and I had it in the the section of the door where you like a cup holder type thing, but it wasn't a cup holder. It was like a smaller section, where you can store stuff in there. I had the fries in there, man, and I was just I was eating in the car, dude. Man, but lifestyle is different in both places, and this is where I said it in the intro of this video, man. Like, it's two wonderful places that are at the highest level, in my humble opinion, of world standards, right? In terms of life, you won't be extremely disappointed in either, in my humble opinion, if you're a free flow person like myself, right? However, if you're a person looking for something specific, yeah, you're going to definitely notice a difference. Because I remember here in Finland, I was like same 4 days ago when I was out and about, and I was walking, and there was people in front of me, and there was a guy, his woman, and their 2 kids, and they were just walking beside each other, blocking the entire pathway, right? And I was inside deeply frustrated because I'm like, get out of the way, right? And typically me, I'm always stepping. When I'm walking, I am going. It's like I got to get to where I'm going at, right? I sometimes cool it down being here in Finland, not trying to be in a rush too much, but it's my natural state where I'm like, let's get it done, but that's something that you will definitely notice, as a difference between Europe and, the United States.
Are not okay. They're looked down upon in exactly the same way that smoking is looked down upon in the US, which goes to show you human beings are willing to draw different lines in the sand. Europeans will tell you it's not healthy, right, to eat that fast, it's rushed, but it goes beyond that. It feels almost morally wrong. I think that's a good spot to pause and introduce a new concept. I have this running theory that there are 2 forces at play in shaping culture. The first is peer pressure. There's always a certain kind of pressure that exists, enforced by the people around you on how things should be, how you should operate. And the other idea is normalization. It's seeing a certain kind of behavior that's very widespread around you to the point where you get desensitized to it and you find it normal. So let's talk about some examples of this. I want to talk about work here for a second, which feels very related to the speed of things in my mind. The US is a super competitive society. There's a lot of peer pressure to work harder and longer, and if you don't, somebody will be there to replace you. No guardrails, no off switch, so it leads to a more imbalanced way of living, I find. This leads to a dynamic where there's very little vacation time. And not just that, people don't take that vacation time. You're lucky to get even a couple of weeks, but it's been normalized to not even necessarily take that time. That becomes a sort of like self-perpetuating cycle. It does feel like there's a fear of stopping. So there's the peer pressure and the normalization of work that's taking place in the US. And the same is at work in Europe, but just in a very different way. In Europe, I feel a sort of peer pressure to not work at certain times, like on Sunday, because it's seen as insane and unhealthy.
Yes.
And because Europeans treasure their vacation time and really stick to it, it has a normalizing effect. I don't look at time off in the same way I used to. I'm coming to realize it's good to unplug, to recharge.
No, it's very good.
You know, to not have everything.
And that's the thing with Europe. I think a lot of people, you know, maybe I would take it, you know, way less in terms of, you know, like, for example, you're used to the American culture, just chop it up, get it done, moving fast and everything. But then you're in Europe and it's a slower life. It's a slower pace. Everything seems more in control. You don't have to rush to get something done. You know, it's a sort of thing that, you know, it gives you that boom. You know, you're still going to work hard, but it's like, boom, wait a minute, I can slow it down. We'll be fine. You know, so Europe is a very, very special place. I'm really blessed to be here and experience it, you know, because at one point I never knew what it was. You know, obviously I'm just in Finland. I haven't traveled the entire Europe, but, you know, one day I hope to do that and experience, you know, the other, you know, spaces in Europe, because I've heard about Germany and their type of work culture. You know, like they achieve so much. Greatest car, what do you say? Car society that creates car, greatest in the world, I'd say, right? And yeah, they chill. They don't work like psychos, right? So, you know, you can definitely achieve with working like a normal person and not going overboard. But yeah, it's typical for an American to just go boom, boom, get it done.
It has a normalizing effect. I don't look at time off in the same way I used to. I'm coming to realize it's good to unplug, to recharge, you know, to not have everything revolve around work. So there's pros and cons to both sides here, because I think the US is a really incredible place for the ambitious if you want to advance your career. And that feeling of ambition all around you can be infectious. I felt it as like a fresh wave of energy. The only thing is, it doesn't feel conducive to a healthy rhythm over the long term. And the thing about grocery shopping, you know, I was seeing a lot of people order on Instacart or Uber Eats or whatever, and it's not like those things don't exist in Europe, but there's like an emphasis on efficiency in the US. Here in Europe, a lot of people will shop for groceries on a very regular basis, almost daily or every other day, for fresh produce, and they'll buy in season. There's nothing really efficient about it.
They buy in smaller quantities. I will tell you that. Being here in Finland, I've seen it smaller quantities, and I'm like, dude, wow, that's it? Not for me. I need a lot more because I'm not coming back. But yeah, they do things different over here in Europe for sure.
But it is healthier and tastier. Now, I wanted to talk a little bit more about acceptable behavior, because it's related to this point I made about peer pressure and normalization. There are clearly different ideas about work, but also just what is acceptable behavior in general. I find that there's a lot more of an anything goes kind of attitude in the US than in Europe. Growing up, each year there would be a pajama day, which was this really fun day where you go to school in your pajamas. I did this when I was like 11, 12 years old. And I'm not sure what happened. Maybe this has always been the case and I didn't realize it, but it really struck me that I will see adults, full-grown adults, walking around in pajamas in the US. I saw it when I was there just a few weeks ago. I have never seen that in Europe. And in fact, it's funny, the opposite's taking place here in Paris, where women in my life in particular will come and visit, and they feel they cannot go out without dressing well, because Paris is
it's really a crazy thing for me, like seeing it in Europe. Like it sometimes puts fear inside of me. Like I'm like, dude, these people are different, man. And it's like sometimes I'm like so scared to approach, because it's like, dude, you don't see anybody that, you know, just seems like they take. It's weird because Americans work extremely hard. One, Europeans, they chill. They understand that they ain't got to work too hard. You know, they work to make sure that they, you know, survive. But on the other hand, it's like Americans are so free-spirited. Europeans are just like, more strict, more boxed in. That's how I feel, right? In a sense where you wouldn't see freaking pranks going on in Europe, right? If I ever see a prank in Europe, I'd be like, whoa, that's so cool. That's probably would be my reaction, because I'd be like, dude, there's no way people in Europe do this. Wow, seeing somebody in a funny costume, like there's many times I've thought about dressing in a funny costume for Halloween, and I haven't done it because I'm like, yeah, this is not the United States. I don't know how that's going to be received. Probably people call the cops on me and shit. So I just refrain from doing it. But yeah, it's definitely different, man, and quite a shocker.
I have never seen that in Europe. And in fact, it's funny, the opposite's taking place here in Paris, where women in my life in particular will come and visit, and they feel they cannot go out without dressing well, because Paris is such a capital of fashion and looking good, I guess. I do draw a link, I don't know how related they are, but in my mind they're connected, between this casualness and the American dream. You're allowed to dream about things that feel ridiculous or impossible. And maybe that contributes to the startup culture that exists in the US, the entrepreneurial spirit, and of course, I should say there's nuance there. There are differences between the coasts of the United States and the middle of the country. There are differences across the different countries in Europe on this particular issue and all issues. But still, I feel a different vibe when I'm here in Europe. And I have found that this has had a positive effect in my life. This is one thing I'm really grateful for from my time in the US. It's this mindset of like going for it, taking risks, and figuring out a lot of the rest later on. Look, I'm aware that there's a lot of psychoanalyzing going on here. And maybe the way that I see the world says a lot more about me than the world. I'm open to that possibility. But what I love about making these cultural comparisons is the fact that it's always a reminder that there's more than one way to live life. I think a lot of life is shaped by our values and the things that we choose to stand by. And a lot of it is based off of what resonates, what feels right. If you have the privilege to travel or to move to another place, it can be a world-expanding experience. But even if you can't do that, being aware of the biases inherent in living in a particular place, because there are always biases, can lead to a richer, more well-rounded experience of life, I think. Life is full of trade-offs, but I do believe in the power of picking and choosing what works for you. You deciding what your trade-offs are to the extent that you can. I really try my hardest to embody the best of all the places that I've ever lived in. It's just fun, I guess, to see how different groups of humans operate. And I think we can better appreciate the world with contrast. Anyway.
Yeah, I do believe that likewise, and I wish that a lot of people would, open their eyes and minds to that. Cultural diversity is a beautiful thing. I'm always going to be that guy who's going to be like, yeah, I'd love to visit this place and experience their food, their culture. For example, once upon a time when I tried Indian food for the first time, I've seen a lot of videos online mocking Indian food, and I tried it for the first time. I was like, good Lord, let me have some more of that. I'm not even one of them guys who love extra spicy food. That thing was spicy and I ate it all, right? And it was really, a moment where I realized, you can't just, judge the book by the cover. You got to open that book and try it out for yourself. Not because you were raised a certain way or you saw things a certain way means that is the only way to anything. You know what I mean? If you're not doing something wrong, then go ahead and try. Give it a shot. And my take is, Europe is a beautiful place. It's a wonderful place. It's going to be the place for many people. However, it's not going to be the place for everybody. And the United States is a wonderful place. Likewise, won't be the place for everybody. I've seen many Europeans leave whatever country in Europe they are at and go to the United States. And I've seen Americans leave the United States and go to Europe. So at the end of the day, both wonderful places with differences. And I wish that, Europeans would, see America as their little different brother, rather than they're disgusting and horrible people, because we're all flawed humans, and we have our differences, what we like and what we don't like, what we accept, what we don't accept, and what we tolerate, what we don't tolerate. So at the end of the day, let's appreciate that, and that's what's going to make us actually even be more special. Anyways, guys, I'm out of here. Peace.